Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Seth Ford. Coach Ford is a strength and conditioning coach as well as the head powerlifting coach at Huntington ISD in Huntington, Texas. Ford has a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology and Exercise Science from the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor. Coach Ford is certified in many areas, including special education, physical education, Level 1 USAW, and IYCA. With over 13 years of experience in the field of strength, he has helped create some of the strongest athletes in Texas. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm glad we're able to kind of sit down and do this. I try to mix in the powerlifting coaches along with strength conditioning coaches, and I kind of catch both with you.
Yeah, kind of get a little both areas in.
You know, it's something I've been thinking about more and more and more. And everybody says, you know, we're not creating powerlifters, we're creating athletes. But if you look at a really good powerlifting program, what's the difference? That may be a question that I have for you. What is the difference between how you train your athletes and how you train your powerlifters? You're trying to hit the whole strength curve with both sets of groups.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's the big confusion is like a lot of people, especially when I first came in, they knew me from my powerlifting background and everything. But they thought I'm going to turn all their athletes, especially like, you know, football players, they're always going to, you know, they're probably going to be your best powerlifters. That's the way it is for me. But, you know, you got kids in baseball, basketball, track, and people think, well, you're just going to turn them into heavy lifters and things like that, slow them down, things like that. And that's not the case. I mean, I always tell them there is a little bit of a difference, but yes, we're still going to push the envelope and get them strong. We're not going to just cakewalk it and do 3 sets of 10 on everything, you know, something like that. But they've got to be pushed a little bit. And my philosophy is always a lot of people want sport specific stuff, but I try to tell them, you know, we're in a small school and all of our kids are playing multiple sports. I tell them I train athlete specific. So everything I do is for every kid that is going to play any sport. It's not going to be sport specific. Now, in the weight room, like if I just got football, there might be a couple of some things that are more specific to them compared to a kid that plays baseball. But there's times where, like, especially in the summer, all the guys are trained together. We got basketball, baseball, football, all in the same weight room. And I train them all the same. That hits everything that they need to get bigger, stronger, faster, and healthier, and make sure that they're going to make it through a long season, because our ultimate goal is always playoffs and a long stretch in the playoffs. Especially our baseball program ended up in the state semifinals last year. And so they're looking for a repeat there. So we got to make sure that they're making it through the season healthy. But at the same time, too, like with powerlifting, we're going to push that envelope to get them stronger through the season. I'm a big proponent of getting stronger through the season, not just stay the same. Playoffs, a lot of times, you know, I've got coaches that'll kind of back off, and instead of 3 days a week, we may cut down to 2 or 1. And I get that. But as long as they're in the weight room doing something at least once a week during playoffs, it's better than nothing, because I've been around plenty of programs that work their butts off all season, and then we get to playoffs, they disappear, and the next thing you know, injuries are popping up, kids are getting fatigued. Once they get, you know, 3 weeks in the playoffs, things like that, they kind of taper off. So the coaches that buy in the weight room and stick with it, you see they can make it through those long stretches in the playoffs. But yeah, with powerlifting, I think there's benefits to any sport with powerlifting. This year, I have a lot more kids that are in basketball that are in my powerlifting program, which is a first. They've seen the benefits. It's a lot more middle school kids, but I'm hoping they stick through when they get to high school. They're seeing the benefits of it, being on the court, not getting pushed around and things like that. Because when we play other schools that are bigger football schools, their kids are playing basketball and they're pushing people around, and they don't like being pushed around. So they want to be in the weight room so they're doing the pushing, not them getting pushed.
I guess the more I think about it and the more I see it, and you listen to Louis talk, is strength is measured in speed. And to get strong, you've got to get faster. You've only got so much time to compete a lift. Well, you have to find a way to create speed, and not all of it in a powerlifting setting is with maximal weights. There's a lot of sub-maximal weights that drive the speed to help carry through the maximal weights. So just like anything, if your speeds are getting faster, you should see a performance boost no matter what you're doing.
I mean, it's the same thing. I'll test with vertical and broad jump, things like that. If you see those things going up, then you know the power is going up and you know the strength is going up. when you see those kind of things and speeds going up too, especially with our girls. Girls, those are the ones that when I start them in middle school, really have to push the buy-in because they're worried about getting bulky and slow and those kind of things. And it's like I try to explain to them, it's like it takes a lot to get like that, and also a little bit of enhancement to involve that what they're thinking, what they're going to look like. And once they buy in, I mean, it's just amazing to see that how much the girls like their strength, their speed, their vertical things just shoot up quicker, honestly, than I think the boys sometimes just comparatively, obviously not lifting as much as the boys, but as far as like parameters, and percentages, they're definitely jump up there quick once they buy in and have that confidence in the weight room, and you could see it transition on the field and the court.
I think it transfers quicker for sure. I think a little bit of weight room really helps a female athlete way sooner than it helps a male athlete.
Yeah. Because I mean, perfect example for me, and it's more of a powerlifting thing. But my two best female lifters that I had that I've trained, they never lifted weights till their sophomore year. But junior and senior year, they were going to state and they were top 10 in state, and they were squatting over 400 pounds, benching over 200, deadlifting high 300s. And it's just that's how fast 1 year them buying into the weight room and things like that, that they just shot up. And so, I mean, it's amazing to see what females athletes can do if they just buy in, and trying to get it down here early. This is my first year where I finally get to work with the middle school girls full time. Last year was kind of at the end of the school year. I got with them, but this year I've got to be with them twice a week in the weight room. And I'm in the pre-athletics program twice a week with the girls. And it's just amazing the difference once they start seeing the improvement, start feeling the strength and seeing the numbers go up and seeing the plates on the bar get bigger as they go. But just they get that confidence in them and want to do more.
I was talking about this with somebody the other day. I mean, a strong girl is a very hard athlete to beat. With the
Yes.
confidence and the strength, they can take over a game. Boys can be pretty strong and they can make a difference, but a strong girl can really run away with the game.
Yes. I completely agree with that.
And when I think about strength, also I think about it as a pyramid. And if the base of it is your strength and your ability to recruit fibers, it's going to take lifting heavy weights. But then that allows you to be more powerful on the peak of the pyramid because your recruitment's so much better. So I can see how powerlifting has aspects that carry over very well to strength and conditioning.
Right. And a lot of times, like you're talking about peaking, it's like whenever I plan things out, it's trying to get them through a season, but then also being able to get to that playoff run. Middle school girls, when their season's over, it's over. There's no playoffs, there's nothing like that. So I can kind of plan for that and then switch to off season, but most of them will go right into the next sport. Our girls here, they play about everything. I mean, as soon as they're done with one thing, they're going right to the next. So you got to plan for that also, to where you're not wearing them out and things like that. You got to plan for the long haul. But with our other girls, like, when they want to, they got a team that's capable of doing a long playoff run. I got a plan that, yeah, when we in the season, we kind of want to be at that peak range, but we want to keep going. So I try to plan in my mind 4 rounds in every time. So anytime we have planned their stuff for the season, it's like I'm thinking we're going 4 rounds in no matter what sport. That way, if we do get there, they're peaking around then. And then really after 4 rounds, depending on the sport, there's only a couple more rounds in your state. So it's just trying to get to that point where you don't peak too early, but you don't want to wear them out too long if it's a really long season, because some sports can go really long. I know volleyball girls, like play a ton of games, softball, basketball too. But I mean, every sport's a little different, but it's trying to get them to be able to handle all that stress for so long.
And last year we were working with an athlete and we were trying to peak him for originally we set out to peak him for state, and I think we peaked too quick because he still had Nike Nationals and then he still had Jab Fest on top of that. So
Yeah.
the lessons learned in peaking come back around. So this next year, as much as I hate to say it, state really doesn't matter because he's throwing at U20s in Eugene. So that's the meet we got to prep for. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. When you look at it, you don't want to top everything off too early when there's definitely a chance they could move forward.
Yeah. And the hard part is with powerlifting, like because I'll have three different kind of groups. I've got one group that, and it was usually freshmen or new lifters their first year. I just try to get them to peak by end of season because I know they're probably, they're not going to make regionals. Their first year, it's not easy to get to regionals. And I have some freshmen that will make regionals. And I mean, because I already know like ahead of time that who has got the best potential based off how they've been lifting in off season. Because most of my kids are in athletics, so I can see what they're doing right now. And so I can kind of plan for that. Usually my goal is end of season for the kids that I know aren't going to make regionals. And then the kids that are going to make regionals, we peak. The hard part is I've got kids that I know are, could be state qualifiers, but the hard part is it's never guaranteed. So I don't want to think, okay, we're automatically going to state. Like I've got a kid that he's gone to state the last 2 years and he was a regional champ last year. Good chance he'll repeat. But in my mind, I can't think like that because nothing's guaranteed. We could have a bad day at squat, which he's had before, especially at state. And I don't want to take that chance. So I've got to plan to peak him at regionals. And then, like, usually I'll have a 2 week break before state. And most of the time, the kids that I've had that gone to state, we'll still hit some numbers. We'll still hit some PRs. I think he hit a 10-pound bench PR after 2 weeks from regionals when he pretty much peaked at regionals because we were going for it all. We weren't taking any chances. But he wanted to break the school bench press record. So he went for it and got it. And so it's one of those things. Powerlifting's a little bit harder because there's kind of in my mind, I've got three different groups. I've got the ones that they're getting better and they're just gonna have their season. And then I've got the kids that I know are gonna make regionals. And I gotta make sure they're peaking at the right time there. And then I got the kids in my mind that have a shot at state, but I don't want to say they're gonna go to state until they earn it. And then we'll just plan for what happens after.
Peaking's kind of a finicky business.
Yeah.
So much can happen. A kid could get sick or something could throw them off their game, and then your whole peak's kind of shot. Or another school that you weren't expecting peaks better, and then that kid comes in and beats you, and you didn't see that coming because
Yeah.
he held off on when he was going to make his run. So while it's necessary, it's still not a sure thing.
Yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of times we'll go to regionals and like I'm keeping track of the kids we're going against and playing, okay, this is going to be the one we got to watch for and things like that if we're trying to medal or if, like only top two go to state unless you hit a qualifying total. And usually that's always my goal with my kids. I tell them, I said, let's just focus on the qualifying total and let things lay where they lay. And this year I've got two that could make the qualifying total, but still not even medal, honestly, with the kind of competition that there is. But in their mind, they just want to make state. I mean, it's just being able to go to Abilene and be on that platform because it's a big deal. I mean, whether you medal or not there, it's just getting there is a big deal. So in their mind, if they can just make a qualifying total and get to state, they're happy even if they don't get a medal. But most of the time, depending on the weight class, you're going to be top two if you hit the qualifying total, especially with the bigger boys. Smaller guys like the 198s, 220s, those classes a lot of times are just some freaks doing more weight than the big boys. It's just like there was one year, my first year at Huntington, I had a kid who was, he was trying to make qualifying total his senior year and he missed it by about 100 pounds. But the I guess it was like seven guys. It was like a 1,500-pound total to make it. Seven guys hit that 1,500-pound total. And then like two other guys like were in the 16, 1700s. But just the fact that, you have that many guys just hitting that number and going to state. And it's even bigger at the bigger schools where I think a kid that I coached, he ended up moving to Houston area and he was at a 6A school. And in his weight class, it was 275. I think they had 60 kids that made the qualifying total that they were going against, and it's just insane the numbers that can be at state. With that qualifying total, I'm honestly shocked the qualifying total hasn't gone up with as many kids that qualified, but it's still not an easy task.
Now, when you're prepping your potential state guys, I mean, you kind of talked about your younger guys, and you're just looking for them to have a good season and end on a high note. But when you're prepping your state guys, how far out will you come off the heavy weights?
Honestly, I use the first meet as a baseline, kind of get an idea what they're at, and then through the training season, because like I mean, most of the time, Texas high school powerlifting, I mean, you're almost lifting week to week. But my thing is like I've got 30 something kids. And I try to look at the ones that obviously are regional state guys. And I consider them, I call them like my travel group because we'll travel on Saturdays to invitational meets. So we have better competition, better judging. Then we have our non travel, so like a B team. Those guys are in what we call our league meets, where it's schools in our area that we go against. And those are just more, they're a little more laid back, and the judging is not as strict. So, I mean, we try to make it because if any of those kids make it to regionals, we don't want them bombing out because they got used to parallel squats instead of breaking parallel. And so that's why I like to do the invitational meets as much as I can, but I try to space them out. So, like, my kids have, maybe a 2 week break before the next one, but we never go heavy. Like, at the most, we practice our openers over and over again, what we plan for the next meet. And usually my goal is after the first meet, they have their opener, and then their second attempt is always their old max. And then the third attempt is going to be a PR. That way, if they miss their third attempt, they don't lose anything on their total. So even if we have a bad day, we could still have the same total, or maybe we had a bad day on bench, but we had a good day on squat. So we still get a little bit added to that total every couple weeks. So that way, by regionals, they're usually opening up with their first PR or higher as their opener by regionals. But yeah, during the weeks when we get into season, like right now, I can push them heavy, and we can, a lot of it's just breaking in the equipment. But once we get to January, we back off. I get that first meet in, and then I start basing their workouts off that. And I just plan their openers, and we just hit them over and over again. So that first lift, we're knocking out of the park, get that confidence, and moving on to a second attempt, which is going to be their old max, and then hit that PR on the third attempt.
And programming it out that way, how are you driving your maxes? Are you looking at when you practice during the week? Are you looking at more of a speed based idea where you're getting the weights to move faster, or are you just almost kind of like using a training max and running almost like a 5-3-1? How does that max keep driving if you're not pushing the heavy weights?
It is like speed, how it's moving, because as long as it's moving quick, then I know it's going to go up in the meet. And the main thing is when we have a little bit more in between time, like the first week, if I have 2 weeks with a kid before he lifts in a meet or from his previous meet, I'll usually that first week we'll hit the opener, and we'll do like 2 to 3 sets of one of that, just nail it, make sure we're getting depth, form, everything's perfect. And then if he's moving it well, then we'll look at a second attempt. What we might do a second attempt, because if he's moving it quicker than before and his second attempt might be more than his old max, even by 5 pounds, we'll say, okay, let's look at this. And we may do 2 sets of one of it. And if it goes well, then we'll plan for that opener and that second attempt maybe to be a little bit higher than his old max and keep moving forward. And then a lot of times I have a number in mind for his last attempt, but I see how the second attempt goes. Because I mean, practice, being in the weight room and then being on the platform are just two different beasts. And so I don't want to say, okay, your max is going to be this. Your third attempt is going to be this. But when we get in the meet, his second attempt moves slow. Well, I can't risk going 20 pounds, let's say, above his old max, and he not get it when I could have got 10 and got that extra 10 pounds added to his total. And then we keep moving forward to the next meet and try to get that other 10 pounds we were hoping for. So it's a lot of just based off what I see, how they're moving it, how they're feeling. Because I can program everything in the world and have numbers in front of me, but if the kid ain't moving it well, then I got to back off and readjust. And so that's why a lot of it's just on the spot, eyeing it, seeing how the kid feels. That's the way I do it. I like the numbers, percentages. It helps guide me a little bit. But as far as seeing the athlete, that's what I've got to see the lifter doing. And if he's moving it quick and fast and confident, then we're going to start moving forward. If he's not, then we're going to level off and just see what we can get. I mean, heck, if I can get a 5 pound PR out of the kid, that's something.
Now, when you're looking at speeds during the training week, are you using a Tendo? Are you using coach's eye? What's dictating to you that the speed is where you want it or faster than what you want?
It's coach's eye. We we're a small school. I don't have any of that kind of technology, so it's all eye, and it's just been doing it so long. and seeing it move. And then and talking to the kid too. I tell them to be honest with them. If it even if it moved quick and it looks quick on video, I'll ask him and like, no, I kind of felt heavy, but it did look move fast, but it's still in his mind it felt heavy. So that's more right there, a confidence thing. And then, like I said, the video, I try to video a lot. I like to post the kids' stuff. They're working, the parents love it. I just want to show that they're working hard. But at the same time, too, I use it for feedback for myself. And I'll use it for the kid too, because I'll send them the videos that said, you need to watch this. This is week one compared to how he is now in week 6. They can look back at that and see, okay, this is what I was doing. Now I'm doing this. Or a kid misses an attempt, I got on video, I'll show it to him and see what he did wrong. And then the next week he nails it out of the park. He can see what he did different. Because my thing is, I'm a visual learner and a lot of my kids are too. And if they see what they're doing, instead of me just talking about it, they'll correct it quickly. But as long as the bar is moving quick and they feel confident, then we move forward. But it's all coach's eye. I mean, thankfully, I've been doing this long enough where I'm not guessing. I kind of feel confident in what I'm doing. But at the same time, too, I've got to talk to my lifters and make sure that they're on the same page with me and feeling confident in that weight, even if it looked fast, if it didn't feel it in their mind, it's like, oh, it felt heavy to me. I'm like, okay, so we'll kind of back off a little bit. Instead of trying to go 20 pounds more, we'll go back 10, that kind of thing. So a lot of coaches, I wish I had the technology, that'd be great, but it's just what we've got and we'll use what we can.
I think the more I do this, the more I see how important the speed work is and how much it drives the maxes if it's all appropriate. So, you know, obviously you need a heavy enough weight moving at the right speed, whether you're measuring it or coaching it or whatever, to drive your max. I don't think you can get so low that it doesn't create an effect. But if you're in that range, how do you dictate what changes you need to make to help the athlete to get faster? Like maybe they need AR or maybe they need to work from a different position. How do you start evaluating where the speed gains can come from?
Usually, depending on it, like with bench, I think when the speed's not there, it's back off a little bit on the weight and maybe do like I really love doing bands and just working on being explosive and those kind of things. So that way I get a little more confident and start dialing in on that speed, just being explosive. Because I think a lot of times, especially in gear, depending on you really have to control bringing it down at a kind of not of a slow pace, but you can't be really explosive with, but you got to be able to flip that switch when you hear that press command and be explosive. And so a lot of times I like going back to speed work and kind of getting them on that. I wish I had enough chains. I have like one set of chains and it's just mine that I had when I had my own business and would train kids. It was a lot easier to do the bands and chains when you got, just a few athletes, but when you got 30 something and 4 to 5 benches going at the same time, it's kind of hard to have all that. But I do have enough band sets for, at least 4 benches. So, and we'll utilize those. I like to utilize that a lot more during athletics because I try to incorporate like during the week, I kind of build up to a speed day on Fridays. I like having on Fridays just to finish the week, moving the weight fast, moving it quick, kids confident, see the weight moving fast, those kind of things, just having some fun with it and move on to the weekend and then come back refreshed and ready to hit heavy. But as far as like with the powerlifting part, when we're in the weight room, unless my kids are not in athletics, usually I'll have to try to do some other things to get their stuff in. But most of my kids that are not in athletics, they're usually my raw lifters. So they do a lot of their raw work then. But with them, especially the raw lifters, if things slow down, I like to do the bands, but also not necessarily board work, but like pin presses, floor presses, those kind of things when they have those sticking points. Because a lot of it, they get the bar off the chest well. It's just that finishing off part. And usually with the raw lifters, pin presses and floor presses, I like better than boards. Boards, I like more for my equip lifters. And usually that's just more getting used to the shirt and getting that bar path down. And so once we get to that point, I'd start lowering the boards and working toward the chest. But speed's always the key early on. Like right now, I set a baseline for the kids, and like when we're in the weight room, and like, okay, if this weight moves fast, then we can move forward. Like I've got 5 guys that are hitting over 400 on bench, and but I set the baseline like a couple weeks ago for 405 with the one board, and it needed to move quick. So all the guys that it moved quick with, so the next week we go one board, but we're doing doubles, and it's the same weight or even more if it's moving quick. And then if they're feeling really good, I'm like, well, let's go a single. If you feel it, let's go a single. So I can set the baseline for this coming week where we're going to go to the chest. And so again, we'll set the baseline at a certain point, and it's got to move a certain speed. If it doesn't move that speed, they don't go up. So until they hit that speed factor, it moves quick, it moves smooth. I mean, basically in my mind, it's got to move like an opener, something you could hit on your worst day and just nail it out of the park, and then we can move forward onto something else.
You were talking about board presses in there. I didn't do them for a long time. Now our guys are just athletes. We're raw lifting, and I didn't do board presses for a long time. And we were peaking for the end of a season. I want to say it was for the end of track. So we reduced range of motion and we increased the weight. So we went to a 2 board, take some of the stress off of them. I started noticing that their 2 board wasn't as good as their bench press. Now, to build that, we've added those back in. And let me get your opinion on this. Are they weaker off the 2 board because there is a tricep deficiency, or are they weaker off the 2 board because that is the part that they normally coast through on that lift and they never really have to develop power through there?
I think it's a tricep thing because usually when I see that with kids, I'll hit the close grip. We'll push heavy close grip, or we'll do like the pin presses or floor presses. I see an improvement pretty quick is if we push it at least hit those areas twice a week, I think, and hit those areas pretty hard. And then like within a few weeks, I noticed they're starting to get a little better. It's always hard with the equipment. If you know how to use the shirt correctly and everything, it kind of takes care of the work. And like you were talking about coasting through, but a lot of times that shirt will get the momentum and they kind of coast through. But those kids that are even equipped, I still like it when they're doing the raw work, push the triceps. So that way, when they get to that point where they're, because right now weights are moving pretty quick, and that's what we want. But we're getting that point soon where it's not going to move so quick and you're going to have to grind. And that's where if you're not doing the tricep work and the lockout work, it's going to catch up to you. So I'd like the tricep work. I do like it's the Elite FTS, that red pad, the shoulder saver. I've got one of those at each one of my benches. I tried something a little different this year with my football players. We used that pretty much almost all in season. Now, when we did like fat bars and dumbbell presses, we did full range of motion, but our heavy was always with the shoulder pad on there because I'd like the change of range of motion, just less stress on the shoulders. And, I noticed a lot of improvement in our guys as far as staying healthy, upper body wise, not being as fatigued and worn out just from doing just pound and bench press, the heavy, just full range motion. We kind of backed off a little bit this year, and I tried the red pad a lot. We still stuck with some fat. I like fat bars, dumbbell presses, doing the one arm, getting that in, being more explosive. Because, I mean, when you're playing sports, you're not bench pressing exactly the same. You're pushing one arm more than the other. So I like to do a mix, but my main focus this year was not just to do regular barbell bench press with my athletes. It was we went to the red pad and we did that. I know it's just a difference and it felt healthier and stronger. And even when I've switched my powerlifters over going full range, it really didn't affect it much. So, I mean, it's not like it's that much further, but it's just nice to not have to put the stress on the shoulders going just that extra 1 to 2 inches down. I would change the grip from regular to close grip and get those triceps in. But yeah, I think a lot of it's tricep work. Just got to focus on it, get it in there, what I call like secondary lift. We got our main lift. And then right after that, we're going to focus on our secondary lift and treat it, but focus on that weak. Usually the secondary lift is going to be weak points. It's going to be triceps or it's going to be if they're weak in the chest part, like we do. I have football bars and I'll have them do the wide grip football bar presses and things like that. So it's just always a mix to try to hit those weak points. But So every kid's developed different, and every kid, has their strong points. No matter how much you push, they're still going to have that point where they're just, they're weak in that little bit of area.
And that's interesting. Me and Monty Sparkman kind of had this conversation the other day, how important volume is to the bench press. And while I agree with that for sure, because we had taken some volume out and we've seen a plateau on our bench press and even some dropping. So he's definitely correct there. But with what you were saying about the triceps, what I find myself wondering is we hit triceps really hard. Dips, weighted dips, close grip, rolling floor presses, floor presses, dumbbell floor presses. I don't I don't know. That's where I'm confused a little bit because I don't see where it makes that much of a difference off of the two board. Like I know what Louis says. I know Louis says it's triceps. I know you say it's triceps, but man, even when we accessorize the crap out of it, that two board is still weak in some kids. It seems to me like maybe there's something I'm missing more so than just triceps.
Right. Well, the only other thing I can think of is like I push a lot of back work because like I always tell the kids, big back, big bench. When I think a lot of times with them trying to teach them to, when they're digging into the pad, having the shoulder blades, and then when they press to push through the shoulder blades into the pad, and a lot of that comes at the lockout. So a lot of times, like you said, if the kids aren't seeing in the triceps work and it's not panning out, honestly, it could be back work. I try to get the kids to do a lot of back. This year I fortunately had a little bit of money and found some T-bar row machines, and the kids like those, and just trying to find things to get them to like doing back work because it's like they don't like it that much. And like I always tell my kids, the things that you don't like the most are the things you need the most. So things like that, getting that back work in, the upper back, I think helps out in that area too. If the triceps aren't panning out, the tricep work. But that's my opinion on that. Like the back, I'm a big believer in that helping your bench is to build up that back strength and get the kids to learn how to use their whole, I keep telling kids, bench is a whole body movement. You got to learn to use your whole body. It's not just the chest and the arms. It's like you got to use your whole body, and trying to teach them that, especially early on. Like I'm trying, my middle schoolers, I'm trying to teach them how to use their whole body correctly so they can take advantage of it and learn how to use their back and driving through and digging in the pad and things like that, and leg drive and things like that without lifting your butt up and stuff like that to get that bar off your chest quickly and lock it out.
That's the interesting thing about back work, and it seems like the better your better lifters start understanding how important that is, and then it makes coaching that way easier because they feel it when you can finally get them to, like you said, pull their shoulder blades together, create a good arch, and lift their chest up. I don't know. That's how I tell them to do it. Lift your chest up into the bar as they're pulling the bar apart. It seems like you can create a tightness in that raw bench press that while you're not wearing a shirt, it's still incredibly hard to get that to contact if you're to your chest if you're tight enough. And I think a lot of that comes from back strength.
Right. And I think some of the two also, like when we were talking about the lockout, if you really watch the kids, you'd be surprised how many, because I try to teach them about breathing, like when they, get that big breath, get the chest big, but to hold it until you finish that lockout. Because like as soon as they take that breath out, you see the chest decompress and they're losing that momentum when they're locking out. And so trying to teach them and learn how to hold their breath until they, I mean, me, I don't let it out till I lock out. When it's not, and I told them, I said, when we're going for multiple reps, obviously you got to breathe. I don't need you passing out. But when you're doing that one rep, we got to learn how to have that lung capacity to hold it and keep that tightness all the way to the lockout. Because that's something I noticed some of my kids doing is they were letting out that air too soon, like right before they were locking out, and I could see their chest decompress, and then that momentum just kind of stops. So I try to tell them like, don't let it out till you lock out. And I think that kind of helped a little bit too. So getting the tries, getting the back, getting the breathing down, it's just trying to get that perfect storm of getting them to understand all those concepts of you got to use all the tools in your basket to get that lockout. They don't realize that until they start feeling it and seeing it, and then they realize, okay, I see the difference in holding my breath. It sucks, but But once I get locked out, I feel like better because once I let that breath out, I feel everything just kind of stop, like I lose that momentum.
And once they let that breath out, the chest drops, then it's all shoulders. And then they get up
Yep,
off the bench and they're rubbing their shoulders and they can't figure out why their shoulders hurt.
exactly.
You were talking about lockout, which, like you said, back, lats, that's where you're starting to come into that. Do you use weight releasers? And you were talking about your geared lifters coming down slow, under control, because of what the shirt does. Do you add weight releasers or anything like that to help the eccentric portion of that lift?
Well, another concept where I don't have the equipment. I have like my own, and it's one of those things. Like I said, when I had my old business, the athletes I would train, we definitely would use those, especially bench and squat. I love them. I think they're great. I use them in my own training, and you really like with that overload of weight coming down on you, you really got to stay tight and focused. But then, like, as soon as that weight's gone, you learn to just explode out of it. And I love them. I wish I had more of them. I would definitely, if I did, we'd be using them not just with my powerlifters, but with my athletes too. It's just one of those things. It's if we had the money, it's kind of like if you got the money, it would solve a lot of problems. But we use what we can, but no, I'm a big believer of weight relievers. I love those. If I have a whole set for my kids, we'd be knocking those out of the park weekly. I think they can do some amazing things because it just gets them to focus. Because once they get that weight off the bar, whether it's on their back or out on the rack for bench, it kind of like gets that oh crap moment. It's like I gotta stay tight with this or else it's gonna take me. So I like them a lot, and the explosion you get out of it. So you kind of get a 2 for 1 out of it. You're focusing on that heavy, bringing it down, got to control, but then as soon as it hits the ground, you're exploding out of it and work on that speed part too.
Now, in your own training or kids you're helping privately, however you work that out, how do you decide how much to overload the eccentric?
Depends on the kid. Usually I don't go crazy with it. It's usually like with bench, it might be, I'd say, anywhere from 50 to I'll say 90 because that's usually what comes out to be when I put certain plates on. So 50 to 90 pounds. Once they get used to it, I'll start them light, maybe 30 pounds and get them used to it, then start increasing as they get better with it. I try to go like myself since I've been doing it so long, I'll go 100 to 150 pounds, not on each side, just like total. So about 75 on each side, just because I'm used to it. And I see a big difference when I'm actually training to get heavier on bench. I'll see a big difference in my bench go up when I really push those numbers on the weight releasers and just makes me more confident when handling the heavier weight. And that's the thing too, with like my kids, they're in bench shirts. Like, I mean, the weight just if they get in their hands, it's a big difference in what they do raw. So trying to get them accustomed to it. That's why I kind of like the board presses and things like that to build their confidence in the weight before coming down. But I would really love the weight releasers for them just to get raw work in with that. So they kind of feel that weight, but then feel the release of it and just be like explode through that weight and get that confidence handling that kind of weight in their hand.
I would agree you get a 2 for 1 for sure. The speed really seems to jump. I mean, granted it's only there for one rep, but you start really pushing that speed that maybe they're lacking in certain parts of their lift,
Right.
especially off the chest. I mean, that's where I think is probably the hardest spot in the bench to gain speed.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, yeah, when you got full range going, especially raw lifters, and this is more athletes, just try not to bounce the bar off their chest. And we got the pad on, yeah, be explosive. When we got the bands, that's why I like to have the pad on when we do band presses. That way they can just be explosive, getting that bar off their chest, but it's not bruising them up, slamming that bar into them. So I like to have the red pad on so they can kind of get that speed completely from up and down, but with the weight releasers, when it releases, you just feel that just instant, and then you just feel like you gotta go, you explode through it. But yeah, those things are awesome. I love those. I wish I had more of them. We'll get there sometime, but yeah, I'd definitely be incorporating those a lot more if I had them.
Before we move on to some other lifts, we've covered a lot in the bench press, but I had a couple other notes here that I was going to ask you about. So When you're improving a kid's lift, and this could be any lift, not just necessarily the bench press, where do you look first? Do you look first at speed and then weak points, or do you look at mini maxes and then speed? How do you determine what to attack?
Usually, like if I got a kid that I've never seen lift, we'll go through some time, make sure they got the form and technique down first, and it may take a few weeks. But then I'll start pushing the weight. Usually I'll start them out high. I like 5x5 for my beginner lifters, just to kind of raw lifters, get them a base, and then start working more toward like 5-3-1. Start getting those singles in, less reps. And like what I tell all my lifters, my power lifters mainly, is when we get to 3 or less reps for bench, I don't even have to put it on the paper. It's pause work. Every time we pause when we get to 3 or less reps, just that way it becomes habit and we're not on the platform and we're pressing the bar before the judge says press. Because I mean, kids get, especially their first meet, it always happens. A kid just touches and goes and like it slip, puts the bar back, jumps up excited. They got the weight real quick. I'm like, no, yeah, that's why we practice the pausing when we get to the lower reps. I kind of baseline, I kind of give them a few weeks to kind of build up. Unless I've had them in athletics and I've seen them lift, I can kind of eye it and kind of start working on what they could do transitioning over to powerlifting as far as, bench. Because I always tell them, I said, once you start pausing, there's a difference between your max in athletics and your max in powerlifting. I said it could be a difference of 10 to 15 pounds just because of that pause, if you don't practice for it. And I said that. So that's why I kind of like when we get down to those lower range reps, you have to pause on your work just to get in that habit, but build that base of, controlling the weight down, not just touching and going real fast. I don't mind in the warm up and the, build up to the main sets, touching and going, just getting loose, get that blood going. But once we get to 3 or less, we're really focusing on maintaining tightness and making sure we're getting what we need out of it so it transitions to the platform.
The other one I see that would go along with that is the rack. Like heavy weights, they want to go straight to the rack with it and rack it. And it takes
Yes.
that time to, hey, we're going to hold and then we're going to go to the rack. Start practicing that.
Yeah. So like, yeah, we do that all the time. Like I tell the kids, whether it's squat or bench, that as soon as you're done, you need to hold it and count to 3 and then rack it. Or a lot of times when our kids are spotting, they'll call the commands for them just to get in habit. And I always tell them, make sure they're fully locked out and then tell them to rack. That way it's not a too instant. A lot of times when we're training, the kids that are doing equipped and got that heavy bench, when we're doing multiple reps, I'll rack it pretty quick. I know they're fatigued after doing multiple reps with that bench shirt on and the heavier weight. But when we're doing singles, try to treat it like a meet as much as possible, especially squat. Squat's one of the worst ones as far as kids stepping forward before they hear the rack command. So I always tell them, even in their warm ups, like as soon as they're done with their thing, stand there, look straight ahead, count to 2 3 seconds, then walk it in every time. And most of them listen. There's some that still don't, and then they'll see it when they go to a meet and they go in the rack and they're like, oh, yep. And I'm like, see, I told you. But it's a matter of just habit, make it habit, just lock it out, hold it a couple seconds, then put it in the rack, whether it's squat or bench. And then, deadlift, I told them just you gotta hold it and wait for that down command. So that's another one too, where it's like when they lock out, not to immediately go back down when they're getting on their heavy sets. Just practice holding it. You pretend the judge is right in front of you. That way it transitions to the platform because you hate to miss a lift for that. You bust your butt for 3 lifts for each one, and then you miss one because you weren't paying attention to the commands. When you got the weight, no problem. And a lot of times, depending on how things are going, I may make them redo that weight instead of going up and taking the chance of missing it, and then all we get is our opener. That I don't want that to happen. So depending on the situation, I have to judge it from there. But most of the time, just as a learning thing, I'll make them redo it in the same weight. I won't let them go up, even if they got it okay. It's more of a teaching moment to make sure they understand you've got to be focused and you've got to be disciplined on every little thing just to get that one lift in.
Yeah, and it matters in every other sport. So, that'd be a flag in football or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, you have to teach that, hey, this is how we have to do it to keep everything clean and keep our points going up.
Right.
I've watched some of your videos, I've watched a lot of your bench videos of your guys benching. Do do they always bench in gear, or do you spend time building up the raw qualities and then having the gear accentuate that?
Fortunately, like most of my guys, especially the ones you see in the videos, they're all in athletics. So I get all their raw work done then. So when they come in the afternoon to me, they're just jumping in the gear. Now, I do base off after the gear is done, after we're done lifting it, I'll base their secondary lifts off what they're not getting in athletics. So a lot of times, like pin presses or floor presses, we don't do those as much in athletics. So I save those and use them during training. That way they still get something. They're getting those weak points and things like that that they're not getting during athletics. Because athletics, I'm trying to train them as an athlete, but they're still getting a lot of raw work in. Because I mean, I'm big on, like you were talking about volume. We press 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We get it in because my opinion, the more they're pressing, the more their bench is going to go up. And I'm a firm believer in that. So I try to get 3 days a week in. And then normally I try to get the kids to make sure that they come on a bench day after school when we've done pressing during the day. So it's kind of you get 2 workouts in the same day, but we're not back to back benching. I like to have a little day in between rest, but usually Mondays are when we push the shirt because they've had the weekend to rest and we'll get in the shirt and go. That way they're kind of fresh off that. And usually Mondays in the weight room, depending on the group, they're not going as heavy, so they can kind of save it for the afternoon when they get in the shirts.
And I was leading up with that question for this one where I really think it might matter is the squat. A wide base squat is so much different than a narrow base squat, and you're going to have to wide
Right.
base squat in gear. So, do you start teaching that at the raw to develop the outside of those hips and develop all the qualities you need to help the gear in a wide base squat?
Yeah, weight and also squats another one like I like to do 3 days a week. And the way I base it off of, especially with my athletes, is Mondays are always front squat. They hate Mondays, but I'm a firm believer in front squats. And then we'll do middle of week, we'll do like box squat. And we do box squat. I tell them to, I tell them to get that wider base to kind of, help transition over to the gear. And then Friday would usually just be either what I call a football squat, where they're just work to parallel, get some weight on the bar, move it, but parallel. Or I like doing with my athletes, especially down at the middle school, we do it every other week on Fridays, pin squats, so they can work on being, coming down control, stop on the pin, and be explosive. So I try to tell them, my middle school kids, especially, I said, we what we're doing is we're working on squatting to the basement and then working our way up through the week. So like Monday, front squat, get your butt down. Wednesday is either box or just, regular, to the where you'd go to a box I have for them here at the middle school. Like they got to reach a certain point, but for everybody, it's pretty much right parallel. And then Fridays will be pin squats. So we work on being explosive, and I'll raise or lower the pins every other week. That way they can work on that explosiveness. But as far as like with the power lifters, yeah, usually in the raw work, it'll be box squat, work on the wider base. But I still, because they're athletes and I got to train them for their sports, I want them front squatting and I want them, working on explosive work like pin squats or, getting just a parallel squat to, still move some decent weight. And they already got their low part in with the front squats, So I kind of like hitting all angles. But for my powerlifters, usually I transition the box so that way they work on sitting back, because in that gear you kind of have to sit back into it, depending on how tight it is. So and that wide base. So I'd love the box to be able to get them to focus on that and not touch and go, actually sit on the box and stop and then have to fire up. So that way they have to, I teach my girls to do that too, athletes. I try to really push them on the box squats because I tell them it's kind of a 2-for-1 if you do it correctly. You come down with control, build up the hamstrings, and sit on the box, and then fire off with the quads. And you're getting both in, but you're focusing on separate different occasions. Coming down, focus on hamstrings. And then when you sit on the box, you're firing off the quads. And so if you do those things correctly, you get the most out of the box squat. And so it's just trying to get them to focus on that build up, getting to the box and getting that wide base.
When you're teaching that box squat in the beginning, yes, I know what you mean about the hamstrings aren't there, and a lot of times they'll crash, and so you got to work
Right.
with that. But the other thing I noticed, and I don't know if you do or not, so this will be interesting, is it takes so much to teach them how to reach back with their butt and grab the back corner of the box that they'll want to come into that too upright, and it puts the bar almost on the back side of their glutes, and then they can't get up. Do you find you have to get them where it takes a little more time to get them comfortable reaching back with their butt and keeping that bar over their hips?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little time. I mean, you can't just load them up right away. And a lot of times, like my kids, like me, I don't know if I've just been doing box squatting so long, but usually I'll squat heavier box squat than I will a regular squat, where it's the opposite for them. They struggle with a heavy box squat compared to the regular squat for at first, once they've been doing it a while. But yeah, like you were saying, I have to usually start them off light, get them to get the form down and feel everything. Because once you feel everything, then you know what you're doing. Instead of like, I tell the kids, I said, I don't want to see you. I call it plopping. Just crash the box. I want you to engage and stay tight. And I tell them, I said, you're not gonna have to go like slow motion. I said, but you can't just let go. You got to feel the hamstrings coming down. You've got to stay locked in. I tell them too, a lot of times when you go to the box, think of it like you're doing your normal squat, but you're going to hit that point where you stop, but you stay locked in as if you're going down. Because a lot of times you'll see guys sit and they rock and they, and do those kind of things. And it's like you want to stay locked in the whole lift. And that's how you get the most out of it. And eventually, once you get used to it, then you can start putting on more weight. But I try to get them to focus on the form and technique first, then the weight will start increasing. And I tell them all the time. I mean, even my middle school kids, because they, especially the boys, they got those egos. And I tell them, I said, the weight will come. I said, get the form down now, then the weight will come. If you don't do that, then you're not going to see the jumps. I don't like maxing out a lot. My athletes, we do it maybe twice a year, right before like we're getting ready when we coming back from Thanksgiving. They got about a week and kind of get them prepped and get them ready, get that mental part of it. And then the next week we're maxing out. And then I won't do it again until May before we get out of school. But I tell them, I said, you'll see a difference from December to May. And if you're not doing the form and technique right, and you're doing your own thing and you're trying to lift heavy, but you're not getting the reps set and you're not getting the form and technique in, you're going to be that guy when you look in May, you went up 5 or 10 pounds on bench while everybody else went up 30 plus pounds on bench. You're going to be that guy. So, like, I try to use that as an example to kids to focus on the form and technique, that the numbers will come, but you got to, put your ego aside and do what needs to be done. Girls are really not the problem with that. It's the boys. The boys got the ego. The girls, I love coaching girls. They're more coachable. They're going to listen. They're going to do what you need. And they're the one. I think that's one reason they see the biggest improvements compared to the boys is because they don't have that ego part in them. I mean, yeah, the ego will kind of kick in once they start lifting heavy and want to be stronger than everybody. Yeah, but they're not doing it in the weight room to the point where it affects their training. And the boys, I got to get them to suck it up and put it aside and leave it at the door and work on that form and technique. And then the weight will come. And you'd be surprised if they do it, how quick it will happen. But they got to learn to, like the box, sit back into it, keep the form, keep tight, learn, try to teach them the breathing techniques as far as engaging their, gauge the abs and everything like that. So that way, because I'm not big on using belts until we get to our heavier sets. When it's 3 or less and it's 90% or above, yes, put the belt on. But before that, you got to learn to engage that core so you aren't having those issues like when you sit on the box, leaning forward or leaning too back, but you're locked in and being able to fire up correctly.
That's very much how we look at it here. We'll go as long as possible without the belt and then add the belt on our upper sets. And for the same reasons why you said, I think you could always wear the belt and then your core gets neglected and you don't get all the core work out of it that you could get.
Right. And that's the thing with the kids. I tell them because like a lot of the kids are like, why don't we do a lot of core work? I'm like, well, you do it in everything you do if you know how to use it correctly. And, I try to teach them how to embrace that, the core when they're doing certain lifts. And then a lot of times, especially like when the kids, after they've done like a heavy bench and they know how to use their whole body, like, God, my abs just are killing me. And I'm like, yeah, because you know how to use your whole body. You used your abs like you're supposed to, it's going to be sore.
And it helps when they go into the belt because now they can get their whole lower half pushed into the belt, where if you just go straight to a belt, all the lever gets their stomach pushed into it.
Yeah. And then how much like, once they get the belt on and they start doing the weights, like, man, that's a lot easier. I'm like, yeah, but we waited, instead of just using it the whole time and you don't see anything benefit out of it because you've been using it through your warm up and everything like that. You depended on it too much, but then when you need it, when you get to your heavier sets, you're like, oh, this does actually help, and then but you feel more confident when you get that belt on to push the heavier weight. But they gotta learn how to use their body first before you start using things supplementals to help out.
It seems to me in the box, you can definitely see flexibility issues quick. Will you adjust the box height if you're seeing some mobility issues, or do you just kind of have them work through it with lighter weight? How do you increase that when you've got kids that can't get the depth just because they just can't move?
Well, a lot of times, like with the kids when they're not in equipment, and if they're having a hard time getting down, it's doing a lot of hip mobility work. It's a lot of body weight stuff. Like my son's going to kill me, but I'm going to point him out. He's a big kid. He's only 14 years old, but he's just a little over 6 foot. He's 290, and he all middle school has had tightness in his hips because he's grown almost 7 inches in 3 years. And so every time he hits a spurt, it kind of we kind of get all that work in, then hits a spurt, and it's like starting over. But he's really tight in the hips. And unfortunately, this year, our athletic trainer kind of worked with him on that because he was having some hip pain in football. And he does a lot of stuff at night before bed to get that mobility back. But like I told him, because he's had so many issues. And I'll tell other kids too. I said, I'm more impressed if you can do a body weight squat than with a bunch of weight on your back getting down because the weight's forcing you down. I said, if you can sit there and get your feet set and do a full up and down body weight squat, I'm more impressed with that than throwing 400 pounds on your back just to get you to break parallel. And so it's one of those things of just trying to get the kids to do the work on their own because it's a lot of times we don't have that kind of time to do it on the side, but I do have things in place like during athletics where they can work on those kind of things. We have bands and things like that. I have some of the things like during powerlifting, I have a bunch of those hip circles and I'll kind of show them a routine to do through it. And, it's kind of up to them they need to do it on their own at the end of practice. And if they don't, that's on them because I set everything up for them to do. But when I've got 30 something kids in there by myself, and honestly, too, most of the time baseball's in there with us, I'm can't hold everybody's hands. So they got to be independently. So if they want to have that flexibility, they need to work on it themselves. But a lot of it's body weight work, I think, because yeah, I can throw weight on their back and get them down if I need to. But when it comes to without the equipment, I'd like them to do their own, get their mobility work in, things like that. And they'll see an improvement pretty quick if they do it. They have to be consistent. Now, when it comes to equipment, getting them to get down, yeah, I'll adjust the boxes. Like my son right now, he like most of the kids right now are where I want them. I just want them at parallel because I mean we got time. Because a lot of kids are like, well, I'm not parallel yet. I'm like, well, right now you're on a 6 week project. You got 6 weeks to get there. I said, right now we just need to hit parallel for at least three, and then the next three breaking parallel, and then work on the weight and the openers. My son, he just got a new suit and he's got briefs. And so he's, I put a video up and I know nobody made comments, but I know what people are saying. Well, that's really high. Well, yeah, of course it is. It's equipment. He's breaking it in. But he's one I have to get like a high box on and then I'll start working him down. And it helps him with his confidence because there's a lot of times he's going down good, but I think he worries that something's going to happen. He just shoots back up because, that equipment, it can take you one way or the other if you're not staying with it. So right now I saw his baseline with the suit. And so next week when he gets back in the suit, gonna put him in a box, get him to reach there. and just get lower. And the more he works in the suit, the more he gets down. But when it comes to the raw work, it's got to be they got to do the mobility work on their own, and everything's set up for them to do it, and get the hip circles going, things like that. And once they get that going and start feeling more confident, then it just transitions everywhere else.
I noticed I had to add in a lot of seated good mornings to help kids because I hadn't noticed it for a long time. Most everybody was pretty good. And then as I get more and more athletes in, it's becoming more something we have to work through. And the seated good mornings were a good warm up to get them ready for squatting and deadlifting, but also it seems like it creates more mobility to me than a standing good morning.
Right. I push a lot of the good mornings. Like we have safety squat bars, and I don't know. I've always liked that just for my preference, doing the safety squat bar good mornings. Maybe more of a comfort thing, I guess, but also my shoulders and arms are jacked up from years of lifting to where I can't get under a straight bar anymore. So I just have the kids do what I do, but I like the good mornings. I really wish God, I wish we had some reverse hypers. Well, I had a couple at my last school. I love those for lower back work and things. But, good mornings I think are great. I program in those at least once a week for the kids to get in, and they hate them, but I think they're great. They feel awkward and everything, but they're just hitting the right points that you need to enforce everything else you want to incorporate and get the most out of your squat and deadlift.
And then you can put them on a rotation with different RDLs and you're kind of hitting it from both directions.
Right. And yeah, RDLs are a staple for us, like athletics. It's once a week. They are doing RDLs. And like what I like to do with my middle school kids is we live 3 days a week, and Mondays RDLs, Wednesdays high pulls, and then Friday is full clean. We kind of work up to the clean, but they're enforcing those, the lower part, and then they're forcing the higher part of the clean. And then once we get to Friday, we're just full out clean. We'll go back and forth between, pulling from the floor or hand clean. We'll go back and forth between that for what we're trying to accomplish. If it's more, I want speed that day, we'll go to hand clean, work on that. Then power, we'll go from the floor up, because I have different kinds of athletes. Once they get to high school, like for me, like I know I'm kind of going off subject here, but the clean wise, my baseball, basketball players, girls wise, and all girls really just hand cleans. I just kind of like the speed, the movement for what they do. Track guys, football though, I want that power from the floor up, because they're just with what they have to do on the field. I think it transitions better, but they still get some of that speed and hand clean work in too. I go back and forth between them, but like the other athletes, I kind of just keep it hand clean for that movement and speed for them.
Now, you've kind of talked about your ollies and your squats. How often are you rotating your deadlifts in?
I just do deadlift once a week. I think it's a taxing lift, and I just focus on it once a week. And honestly, once we get into season, it's pretty much they do it in a meet. Like if I've got my younger kids that are probably going to lift 4 weeks in a row, they just do it at the meet. Like I was saying earlier, I'll base their openers and their second attempts and their third attempts off the baseline of their first week. So we'll figure out an opener and start the first week, but then the second week we'll just gradually move up. But I don't really, other than like they won't do the main deadlift during the week, but they'll do like the accessory type things, the RDLs, the good mornings, maybe some light deficit, but I never during the season have them do full on deadlift. I For some reason I've seen a benefit from it, taken away from not doing it often, and just save it for the meet. But we'll hit the other aspects of it. Like my bigger guys, a lot of times they'll just do rack pulls like through the season. I'll focus on their weak points. Most of them are really good about getting the weight off the floor quick, because most of them are in equipment, and the equipment helps get it off the floor, but they always struggle with their lockouts. So I kind of like to just during the season, they'll just do rack pulls, maybe some light deficit stiff leg. But as far as the full deadlift, I'm not big on training it more than once a week. I just think that's all they need. Um, that I don't see any benefit from doing it multiple times. I think it's too taxing, especially if they're already in athletics and doing a lot of other things. I think it's just too much on the body. Sometimes less is more.
I can remember when I was first studying all this out and I got some elite FTS conjugate programs and they only had the deadlift in once a cycle. And I now that we're doing it more and more, I can definitely see why. If you got kids pulling huge weight, it's gonna affect their whole cycle if it's programmed in there too often.
Yeah. I think it's too taxing on the body. I mean, I think you just save it for the meet, get the weak points in, strengthen up the areas that you want to hit with the deadlift, get the strong lower back, those kind of areas. The good mornings kind of nail that. I like the deficit, not going crazy on it, just more keep it light, but work on having to go down a little bit more, get that extra stretch in them. And so when they do the regular four from the floor, it just doesn't, it feels better for them.
So doing the pin pulls, how do you keep them kids from bending bars, especially when they're getting really strong?
Honestly, I've been kind of shocked that our bars haven't bent. I don't know how, because I know they're the cheap ones from, because I can tell. We've been pretty lucky. Most of the time, I try to make sure that they're not slamming it down. I think recently one of my videos, one of my big boys, it was like 585. It got away from him and it slammed, but bar didn't bend. Normally, I had actually bought a bunch of swim noodles to put over the bars, but this year I'm teaching PE and had to kind of use those for games and tag games and stuff. So that's I had planned on buying them for that reason specifically, just to kind of help protect the bars a little bit, but then got kind of transitioned into PE this year. So I've moved those over there so I can use them for games.
And now this is something I've noticed because your guys, you have a NASA meet. You actually may do a couple. You may do one in Halloween, and then you do Lithmas. So they use 100-pound plates. Have you found that if you lift off a certain board, that'll tell you closer to what your deadlift's going to be than if you lift off the floor?
I don't know. It's more like, are you talking about more like deficit and things like that, or?
Yeah, because they use that 100-pound plate, you gain almost 3 inches off of a 45. So if you've got a
Yeah,
kid, that's pulling big, you can. This is what I found that we made 2x4 platforms or like boxes so that we could set the bar on. Whatever they pull off that, because it's 3 5/8, whatever they pull off that, they're going to pull in the meat. And,
right.
it just took us a little while to find that out. So then we'll practice with 45-pound plates. Our meat prep will be off those going up into the meat so that they're prepared to pull what they're going to pull because of what them 100-inch plate or what them 100-pound plates give them.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we have some. So once the kids kind of get past that point, we'll put them on for deadlifts. So that way they're kind of used to them instead of just a bunch of 45s. And then also, like you said, the height. But it's a difference. Plus, also, I don't like using it in practice, but we do have like a deadlift bar. I don't use it for practice because I want them more on the stiff bar. And then once they get to the meet and they use that deadlift bar, they're like, man, it just feels easier. And so I prefer like to stick with the cheap bars that we got, the stiff bars that don't have much bend to them, like the deadlift bar. But also too, yeah, once those kids get to a certain weight, we'll throw on the hundreds. That way they get used to that height and everything. They love it. I mean, once they get especially when the NASA meet comes around, they love the gold plates. That's always the goal, especially for our younger guys. When they get those gold plates on, it's a big deal. But yeah, they notice the difference in the height. That they said it feels like I don't have to go down as far. And they usually always hit PRs because of the difference of having to get down further compared. But we do have the 100-pound plates, for my high schoolers. I don't have any down here at the middle school, but we've got, I've I've kind of been breaking down my old gym and bringing some of my stuff up here for the kids to use. And I had like a lot of blocks. And so we'll put the weight on there for them. So they kind of have that little bit of elevated. So they kind of get that feel for it once they get to that point.
And you were talking about the deadlift bar. I have a kid that's come back from college for Thanksgiving, and then he'll be back for Christmas. And we're in the gym they're at down there. They have deadlift bars, and he's been using those. He come back to a straight bar, and he's like, "I can handle way more weight." I don't know if it's learning to fight through that flex of that longer bar, but
Right.
he's way faster off a straight bar now than he ever was.
Really? Huh. Yeah, usually I didn't want them getting used to that, the bar because they always did PRs and always felt like it was easier. So I always kind of want to make it harder on them in training so that way when they get the platform it's easier. But no, that's pretty interesting. I've never even heard that before. Usually it's always that's the way I was taught, with the deadlift bar and everything. So I just kind of stuck with that philosophy of just saving it for the meet for an off season, but we're doing kind of a max cycle. I'll bring the deadlift bar out so they kind of see how they do with it and everything. It treat it like a meet almost, in the off season. I'll bring out the deadlift bar for them to give a try because they really like lifting with it.
He loves it, and to me, just talking to him, it seems like his lockout is stronger now because he can load the bar up a little heavier. So now his lockout's better. So
Yeah.
he's repping more weight now on the deadlift than I had ever seen him lift before, and he attributes it to that bar. Now whether that's the case or not, I don't know, but
Right.
So we've kind of been going for a while. I got a few more questions, and I'll let you enjoy your Saturday. I know all the rivalry games are getting ready to start. So we had touched on this just a little bit on the belt, but will you hold knee wraps, belts, and briefs back to a certain period of time and let them develop the tendon strength and different things they need, or will you always let them, your power lifters, run in assisting aids like knee wraps and stuff?
With the fact that I got them in athletics, they're doing everything without that. So I kind of get everything I need in athletics for them. And then when they get to me, after school for powerlifting, we can just get in the gear, we can get the wraps, we can get the belts. Now, my kids that are not in athletics, obviously they'll focus more on the without the equipment until they need it. Like I always say, we don't get into it till we get to that heavy 90% or more, or three or less rep range. That's when we'll kind of start getting into that equipment to help them out. Usually in the off season, though, like we really don't touch wraps and things. We'll use the belts every now and then, when it gets heavy enough, but once we're done with season, I kind of just like to get away from the equipment, get them away from it, just take a break. Sometimes it's hard too because some of my kids, like even though our powerlifting season ends, they make it all the way to state. They're kind of done in late March. Well, then later on in May, I host like NASA, their Texas state meet. I'll host in May, and so the kids will keep training for that. And then like my son, he's real big, he loves powerlifting. So there's always Mike Womack, the guy who designed Bench Daddy. He hosts a bench press contest out of his place, in June or early July, and we'll hit that up. And then next thing you know, it's football season, so but even during football season, you got some kids that keep training for it. My son's one of them. Like when we had that Halloween meet, he had played a JV game the night before, Thursday night, and then Friday night, he's in the bench shirt trying to hit a PR. Well, I hit a PR on bench, and then he tried to go for a bigger PR. But he was just tired from playing a game the night before. But it's one of those things where sometimes, like in his situation, he's still in the equipment almost year round. And then the kids that don't want to compete year round like he does, as soon as I know they're done, I get them out of it and we don't touch it till we get a couple months out before we start season just to give them a break.
Now, watching all of your guys and knowing how gear works, you have to create some incredible spotters because once you're out of the groove, you're out of the groove.
Right.
You got to have kids that are locked into the job they're doing. How are you able to create kids that you can trust to squat or to spot that heavy weight?
We'll go over it. We'll practice it. I'll tell them what I'm looking for, what you need to do. But the perfect examples I use are the NASA spotters. They're, I think, one of the best in the country as far as spotting. I know Rich Peters, he kind of came up with their style of spotting, especially when it came to squat. But we kind of try to follow that. But I make sure that the right kids are in the right place. A lot of times, like we're on Thanksgiving break and I had the weight room open. And, like I would tell some kids, we'll do this if we have the right people there. If I don't have the right people there, we're not doing it. Fortunately, we had a good showing. And so, like Monday, the kids could push bench. And, then the other days, push squat. We kind of focus mainly on bench and deadlift this week because a lot of them are going to do the Christmas meet but they're not there for squat yet. And I said, well, how about let's just do push pull? So this week was just mainly bench and deadlift in the suit, getting ready for that. And then next week we'll get in some squat early on. So that way they're not taxed for the meet on Saturday. I think just creating that atmosphere where the kids feel confident though to push themselves, you've got to have the right people there. And fortunately, it's a process. I start them early in middle school, teaching them how to do it. Squats, one of those things is the one I worry about the most as far as, making sure they're paying attention. Every time they walk out the rack, I tell the kids, follow the bar. Don't just stand there and watch it and then they react. It's like follow it all the way up and then walk them in every time, make sure they're safe, and then bench again, follow that bar every time. And like if you see the videos, my hands are on the bar and things like that. I'm not doing the weight for them. I know people think, but it's more of a guidance tool. And then as they get more confident, they're handling the weight better. Then I'll start kind of moving away from that. And then when we get closer to a meet, we'll treat it like a meet where, fortunately, Texas high school, they have it set up now where if you lift off of them, you have to stay in spot, which I like. Before you had to leave and move and you had to depend on the side spotters, which I wasn't a fan of because most of these times in these high school meets, these kids that are spotting are like, freshmen or JV football players. They don't want to be there. I mean, I've seen kids like looking at their phone while a kid is pressing, doing a bench press. And it's just, I'm glad they installed that because with my bigger kids, I'm staying there making sure they're safe. Because there's been times where the bar slipped out of a kid's hand and I caught it right over their face, and thankfully that rule was in effect because if it wasn't, that bar would have been on that kid's face and broke his nose and who knows what else. But yeah, safety is a big issue because we need that confidence to be able to go out and do the lift. And like I said before, like NASA is one of those ones that I tell the kids, watch what they do. I said they are a perfect example of what we need to do every time we're in the weight room to make sure we keep everybody safe.
I'll hit you with this last one because I was looking through your pictures here the other day, and I think I think it's really cool what you do for your meets. But where do you find the big inflatables and all the things you do that you put behind the platform that really makes that meet worth going to? It's the little things that make it fun to show up and do. So where do you find those at?
Uh, a lot of those I've had for years. Like the big one, it started with Santa, the big Santa. Before I started hosting NASA meets, I was trying to find something for the kids to do because, like, I didn't have enough people to really put on the big high school meets where you got four racks going and you need so many people. And I needed something for my middle school kids to stay interested in powerlifting because it's like, it's hard to focus on doing something, but you're not really getting to lift and meet. So I came up with like the Christmas meet and we started doing it. And I was going through Home Depot one day and saw it and I was like, I had to have it. And so I got it. Wife wasn't real happy about it. But I just liked it because, when you look at the pictures of the kids lifting, it just like they love walking through it and having that background and it just kind of makes it a little more fun. And then I started doing Halloween meets, found a Halloween one. It kind of grew. Like anytime I saw something, I'd buy it. It was driving my wife nuts with all the inflate. I got a storage unit full of them. And, fortunately, they've lasted. That Santa I've had for over 10 years. And if he goes, I don't know what I'm going to do because I've looked for like that one and nobody else has it anymore. And the ones they put out now are just kind of cheap. And, I guess that back then they just made them better. And same with the Halloween one. But yeah, it just kind of evolved and it's more fun for the kids. They love it. And honestly, I think that's what's kind of been our draw to our Christmas meet lately because it's grown so much that this year they changed it to a national meet because we've been getting so many people from out of state coming down to it, and a lot of it's just having fun. The Santa, it's a big draw for some reason, but I just want to make the meet fun for the kids, and if it's just throwing up some inflatables, making it more themed, then I'm good with doing that. I mean it's just kind of my thing and I've evolved from it and I love it. Honestly, it drove my wife crazy when I was trying to look for things for other meets that had nothing to do with holidays, but find something, with it. And, it's just trying to get that draw to make it fun. Cause you got to think a powerlifting meet, it's probably going to be when I tell parents, they're new to the sport, I'm like, it's going to be the longest day and probably the most boring day because you're there to watch your kid do basically nine lifts maybe a total of less than 3 minutes that they're actually doing something, but you're there for 8 hours, or so, and it's like just trying to make things fun. And the blow up just kind of evolved from that. Started with Santa. Now I got a 10-foot Christmas tree, got the Grinch, and then the Halloween started, I found the archway for that and just started adding as I go. It's always, if I find something, I'll grab it if I can get it on sale. That way it makes the wife not, I can, just justify it if I got it on sale kind of thing, but she gets it. She knows the kids love it.
Well, the backdrops always look good, and so I figured I'd ask you how you come up with that. But yeah, watching a powerlifting meet's like watching a roping. I mean, they're fun to do if you're in them, but if you're just there to watch, you've got a long day ahead of
Yeah.
you. Well, Coach, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I appreciate you taking some time on one of your few days off to sit down and do a podcast. It means a lot to me, and hopefully you guys have a successful season.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed this. That's my first one ever, and I appreciate it. And I love talking powerlifting, just and about my kids and what we're about, what I'm trying to accomplish here. Just trying to make stronger kids, but make more confident kids, and we'll just build through that. Powerlifting's, I think, an incredible sport. Something I've been involved with since high school, and I think I've seen a lot of kids' lives change just from being in the weight room. It makes a difference.
It makes a huge difference, and that's something I've noticed since we started doing it. It's powerlifting, but it's so much more than powerlifting.
Exactly.
Well, Coach, I hope the rest of your day is amazing. Thank you again. I had a great time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me again.